Hello, and welcome to the Better Achiever Sessions, where we talk about how to prevent and recover from burnout by shifting from doing more to doing better. I'm Carol Milter-Steiner, an overachiever in recovery, and in this episode, we have Kathy Mann with us. Kathy Mann is a South African writer and speaker who had her life changed by an intense and long burnout. A few years ago, she was a business owner and a managing director, handling millions on behalf of clients. She was also an ultra-marathon runner and a busy wife and mother, my God. And when Kathy burned out, she developed a stress-induced autoimmune disease that she will carry for life. Kathy became a champion for living with passion, expressing your creativity, and exploring your innate talents. She found her passion in writing and speaking in South Africa, raising awareness on burnout and how to avoid it. She is living proof of how hard a burnout can hit us physically, how it can change us forever, and how everything can be transformed once we walk towards our truth and passion. In my talk with Kathy, we tapped into how burnout changed her life and what are her 7 principles of self-preservation. I can personally relate to so much of her journey, except the mom and ultramarathon parts, especially the ultramarathon, and I was very happy to have her. So without further ado, here's Kathy Mann. Enjoy! Welcome to the Better Achiever Sessions, Kathy. It's really good to have you here today. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Good. I'm very happy. You're our second interviewee from 2019, and I'm very happy, not only because I'm talking to you, but for me it's like I'm having a trip around the world without leaving my house in the Netherlands, because my first one was with someone in Pittsburgh, US, and you're in South Africa. You are in Johannesburg, or
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
So I'm going around the world from my study room. It's really good. So before we start to talk about the journey, about how you started, what happened after you burned out, which is the whole reason we are here, I want to know who was the Kathy, the pre-burnout Kathy, like, and how this ultra-marathoning, business managing, parenting, and everything together, extreme, how did that happen, and how were you before your burnout?
Yeah, I think I was quite a different person, I think. I if to describe me, I would probably say I was quite an achiever. So you talk about the better achiever. I pushed myself very hard to achieve, and I held myself to very high standards. A lot of perfectionism and wanting to get everything right, and also quite a bit of wanting to please everybody, to make everybody else happy, and to look after everyone else's needs. So that person was probably quite not very patient and quite irritable and rushed and busy, and yeah, quite different from the way I am now, actually. Yeah.
Okay. And so tell me, how was your experience with the burnout? Like, what was the symptoms? What were you doing at the time? How you were diagnosed, and how do you take the diagnose when you got it?
Yes. Well, I think the top 2 symptoms for me were fatigue and headaches. So I started to get more and more exhausted every day. And as you said in the intro, I was an ultramarathon runner, so I was pushing my body quite hard. And also, as a mother of young children, I wasn't sleeping that well because they interrupt your sleep. So I didn't think anything strange of it, because I thought, well, I'm running a business, I'm running these ultra marathons, I'm pushing myself, I'm not sleeping. So it wasn't a big surprise that I was tired. So it probably took quite a long time to get to the point where I realized something's actually wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
then, nobody actually gave a diagnosis of burnout to me. Nobody ever said those words to me. It took me a long time to put that label on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the diagnosis, yeah, eventually I ended up with 2 sets of diagnoses. The one was HPA axis dysregulation, so the
Okay.
adrenal gland
Mm-hmm.
malfunction. And then the other one was the thyroid disease. I got a Hashimoto's thyroiditis from the stress. And if you ask how I took it, I was pretty shocked that stress could do that to your body, because I always thought, I'm running, I'm exercising, I'm busting my stress, I eat well. It was a shock to me, really.
Yeah. And how was it for you to accept that? Did you kind of try to push yourself even harder? And what did you feel when you were like at the bottom of it? Like what was the
Yeah, I
day?
think the confusion, for me, it was great confusion as to how come, I'm dealing with stress and I acknowledge that, but how come there's lots of other people in the world that are also very stressed? Why me? Why did this happen to me? I think that I had a lot of confusion trying to understand, why did my health collapse and other people's health can carry on living pretty stressful lives? So
Yeah.
the confusion was very prevalent, and it took me a long time to grapple with and accept and understand that this is a lifelong illness, and I now need to live a different life.
Yeah, yeah. And how long did it take you to go from zero to functioning again, barely?
Yeah, I think because it was incremental, the fatigue started to get very, progressively better and better as I got the right care. That process took about 3 years to
Mm-hmm.
become from not functioning at all to be able to work a full day.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I could work a little bit, during year two and that, but to work a full day and still exercise and have energy for my family, that was a 3-year process of recovery.
Yeah. And how did you go from being a managing director to becoming a writer and a speaker and an advocate of burnout and an advocate of avoiding burnout? I must rephrase that. But how did you transition into
Yeah.
like suffering from it and understanding that your purpose would be from now on to help people not have that or at least recover from it for good?
Yes, it was quite a change because, as that driven person, I always was very left brain and very practical and business oriented. And it sort of almost just took me to my knees. It completely destroyed almost all aspects of my life. And looking back, I think I'm really grateful for that because when you're at rock bottom and you've lost everything, you have to really build very carefully and mindfully. You can't just, uh, take it very rash and say, oh, I'm just going to become this now,
Mm-hmm.
because I was so careful not to go down the wrong path again. It was very
Yeah,
clear to me that my work was the wrong work. And
yeah.
I had to try to understand what is it that would really feed me to the point where I felt energized by the work I was doing instead of depleted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the process started when I started writing.
Mm-hmm.
I started a blog about getting sick from stress to share with others and help others, realize what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I started writing this blog, I got very nice feedback from a lot of friends saying, oh, this is really powerful stuff and you've taught us something. And I realized, well, maybe I've got something to share here. Maybe I can benefit the world by researching how to build a happier life and how to have a life filled with joy instead of one that's just, focused on stress.
Mm-hmm.
So that's blog turned into a book, and now I advocate for living a life with joy
Yeah,
instead of just running on that treadmill of corporate life and that. Yeah.
yeah. And how is because one thing that I also notice is that depending on where you are in the world, burnout is something that's happening everywhere, but there's some specifics to the place where you are. So how is it in South Africa? Like how do the people talk about it? What do you think that from the culture, from the work culture, what do you think that contributes to that?
Yeah, I think our culture here is very hardworking. So
Mm-hmm.
people work very hard and they push themselves very hard. And I think that people don't like to, they see burnout as a failure or a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to change that perception. I'd like people to know that when you burn out, it's not because you were lazy or useless. It was because you gave so much, you pushed yourself so
Yeah.
far, you know. And so I think that's the perception that I'm working on changing in my own environment,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't really want to talk about burnout. But I have noticed in the work that I've been doing that there's an awful lot of people feeling fatigue and exhaustion, and they're just not that happy in their work. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've written one book and you're writing a second one. So about your first book, Avoiding Burnout, you came to 7 principles of self-preservation.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about what is the concept of self-preservation means to you, and what are these, if you can walk us through a little bit, these 7 principles that you came up with.
Okay, so for me, self-preservation means looking after yourself to the point where you're strong enough to care for others. Because for me, as a mother, I put my needs last a lot. And then I was in a position for a couple of years when I couldn't be the kind of mother I wanted to be. I couldn't play with my kids. I couldn't go to the parties with them. So self-preservation means looking after, preserving your own strength and energy, supporting yourself so that you can serve others in your work, in your family, your community, whatever you want to do. So that's how I see self-preservation. And then my principles I developed as part of my learning on how I got sick, because being quite an analytical person, when I got sick, I started to figure out, well, how do I get to the root cause of this so that I can not do it again, and to share that with others. So I started to look at all aspects of my life and to understand, what's happening. So the first one, it is the first one for a reason, and that is called, the principle one is know yourself. And that is about when you know that you're an introvert, don't become a salesperson.
My God, that is so true.
And I
I
did that.
found, yeah,
Yeah.
I found out I was an introvert when I was 31, 30, I think. It was last year when I was recovering from the burnout. So yeah, that's
Yes.
really important.
Yeah, so knowing yourself means that you can align yourself with your work and your community and things. So if you know yourself well, you'll realize I need some rest after going out, or I need something that, recognizing what you need and what you want. So that's principle one. The second one is about exploring your creative side. So I really think that creativity has great power, and there's a lot of research studies that show how creativity heals. There's a lot of art therapy, and people use the right side of their brain to recover from stress-induced illness and things. So creativity is really key. So I'm really a big fan of creativity, and even in small things like novelty, doing new experiences, driving a different way to work every day, or trying out a different, food or something unusual.
Yeah.
So that's all about principle two. Then the third one is to prioritize self-care. And we spoke about self-preservation. If you can't look after others when you are not functioning well. So self-care means filling up that cup, and topping up, looking after your own needs, caring for yourself in such a way that you're ready to look after others.
Yes.
The fourth one is about relationships. So my burnout was multifaceted. It came from lots of different places, and work was quite big, but some of my relationships were not so healthy. And I didn't have things like good boundaries in place. And I felt I was working under obligation a lot, not only in my work, but at home. I felt obligated to be there for my children at every moment, wake up in the night, and I had to be the one. And so when we operate under obligation like that, we're not living a life of joy. So the principle 4 is about developing healthier boundaries and making sure that you take care of your stuff and you leave other people to take care of their stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And then principle 5 is about alignment. So that's being true to yourself. Often we have some very negative self-talk. We speak badly to ourselves in our heads when we think, we've made a mistake, and we berate ourselves for it. So principle 5 is around making your self-talk more compassionate and aligning what you're thinking with what you're doing and what you say and your moral compass. So if your integrity and your values are challenged, or different from your organization, you feel in conflict, you feel stressed by that. So 5 is all about aligning. We've got principle 6, which is called lose the guilt. And that is because
huge one.
the lady said to me when I was born, one of my people who worked for me, she said to me, when a child is born, a guilty mother is born. And that's exactly what happens. You want to give them so much. You feel guilty about not breastfeeding them, or you feel guilty about sending them to preschool and not looking after them yourself. And that guilt is not very constructive. It doesn't help you live your best life. So just releasing yourself from all these things you hold yourself to can really be quite liberating. And then, of course, the final one, which is quite significant for me, is about finding meaning. So people tend to, in old age, people don't have something to believe in, and so reason to wake up in the morning. They develop mental illness and dementia much more than if they have a purpose. And that
Mhm.
purpose could be something even as simple as I'm going to make a blanket for charity, or
Mhm.
just small things. So finding meaning in how you contribute to your community or your work, aligning your work with your kind of purpose in life, really has a significant impact on your happiness levels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are all spot on, and
Yeah. These
they're
are the
really, yeah, it's really amazing.
I would have refined them now that I've learned more, but you write a book and you know what you know at the time, but they still hold true for me in looking after yourself and living your best life.
Yeah. And how was the process of writing the book, the first one, being so, I assume you are also or were slightly perfectionist?
Yes, I a friend who always teases me about this because she said, only you that is this high achiever will write a book while you're in the middle of a burnout. So I had to laugh at myself, and she's right. I know what I'm like. I had no goals at the time. It was very difficult. So the book was
Hmm.
something that sort of rescued me from being in this abyss
Yeah.
of no goals and nothing to achieve. But the process was quite slow because I wasn't well. So remember that I
Yes.
had great fatigue. So I could
Hmm.
write a little bit, and then I had to rest quite a lot. So it took a
Yes.
long time to develop the book. So this next one will come out much more rapidly now that I'm well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me about the next one. What is it about? And I'm also, we talked before, and I'm also aware that you're trying a different methodology to it, which is very
Yes.
interesting. So
Yes.
tell me
So
about
my
that.
next book is called Mastering Stress. The first book
Hmm.
was very much about my own journey, how I got there, how I got sick, and how not to do it with the principles. But this book is much more about other people's experiences. So
Hmm.
I've done a lot of interviews. I've interviewed a lot of people around how they manage stress and where it comes from in their lives. And then I've done a research study, an online study of 297 people around these sources of stress and what they do. So in this book, Mastering Stress, the rationale behind the book is that I don't have all the answers, but a lot of people, we can learn from each other. And if
Hmm.
some
Hmm.
people come up with wonderful ideas that you can incorporate into your life, we can all then learn from everyday people. We don't have to learn from the experts that spout this great theory that's quite difficult to implement in practice. Yeah. So the book's about that,
Wonderful.
about what everyday people do, where it comes from, and what they do about it.
Hmm.
The methodology of writing is quite fun. So I have a software background, and so I decided to write this book in an agile methodology, which means that I release a chapter a month
Hmm.
to a beta audience. So I have 31 people who have signed up to assist me with that. And then they review the book and they give me a lot of feedback, and then I release the next chapter. And so hopefully the theory is that I develop a much higher quality product that people are actually interested in by the end of the process. So
Yeah.
that's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. I was just thinking, I think this morning or yesterday, I don't remember. I think it was this morning, about for, for overachievers and for perfectionist people, the farther you have from the process of creation to the feedback, the more painful and excruciating it is.
Yes.
So whenever we can shorten that, and what you're doing with the book is exactly it. Like you're not waiting to have the whole gigantic thing finished and make yourself miserable in a way. You're actually making something that the process itself also helps you master the stress.
It does, and it also it is a stretch for me. When I release that chapter,
Hmm.
I do want to perfect it more, and I want to fiddle
Yeah.
with it. But what I've found is the feedback is really great. People are coming up with ideas that I wouldn't have come up by myself.
Hmm.
So in obsessing about it and fiddling with it, I would never get to that place. And I have
Yes.
to also learn to let go a little bit and just to learn to relax with the kind of level of quality I've delivered. So it's very good for me, but it is quite difficult.
Yeah, I must. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, that's very inspiring for me as well as I'm writing. Also, it's and it can get very even as we are aware of it and we're trying to recover from the perfectionist and everything, we can get caught up in, oh my God, this needs to be perfect, and
Yes,
you
yes,
kind of lose track of reality at some point.
yes, exactly. So it's better that I have the deadline and I have these people waiting, because then I release it. I feel compelled to meet my promise and deliver to them.
Yeah.
And they're actually very patient with how it is, and I'm really enjoying the process. It's really a fascinating journey to deliver a book in this way.
Yeah, it is. And it is very inspiring. And whoever is listening to this or watching, and is also in the process of writing a book, I think it's a very good thing to consider,
Yeah.
especially because we have the technology and all the means to do it now. So
Yes,
it's,
absolutely. And it wasn't an original idea of mine. So I'm
mm-hmm.
more than happy that people adopt that approach and
Yeah,
get as much feedback as they can, because it is also quite an investment to do a book. If you're going to print them, there's quite a large investment. So it helps us
yeah,
mitigate the risk of spending a lot of money on a product that might not actually be viable or of interest to anybody.
yeah, yeah. Great. Um, so what do you think that might make someone more vulnerable to burning out?
Yeah, I think the personality profile of the person who burns out, I think, is someone quite similar to how I was. Someone
Mm-hmm.
who loves to give a lot, a people pleaser. They feel compelled to make everybody else happy all the time, and they're also perfectionistic. They don't want to give up. I think that for me, perseverance was a very strong quality from my childhood values. My parents always taught me not to give up, and that
Yeah.
was a good thing, because I delivered very well in my corporate environment, and that stood me well for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you're persevering in something you love, it's passion. When you're persevering in something you don't love, that's very high stress.
Yeah.
um, so I think that profile is that person who wants to workaholic. They want to make everyone happy. They're not content to just let go and have balance. So I
Mm-hmm.
think those are the people who are quite vulnerable to it. And yeah, that's my assessment.
Yeah. So obviously you changed a lot about the way
Yeah,
you're parenting and the way you're working.
yeah.
And I keep thinking about the ultra marathon word, because for me it is so far from my reality. It has been so far from my reality. I couldn't even believe someone can do that. And so after you've done that extremely exceptional thing of being ultra marathonist, how is exercise in your life now?
Exercise now looks quite a lot more moderate, I must say.
Okay. Good.
I do a bit of walking, which I don't run any longer. I walk. I can run if I want to, but I've realized that maybe that wasn't really my thing, and maybe I was trying to please other people by that. So
Mm,
I think walking is more relaxing, and I get to. It's quite a mindfulness experience to look at what's around me and take in my environment. I live quite near a river, so I can walk near the river and enjoy the trees and the butterflies, and that's really beautiful. And I do a lot of yoga, but I have to laugh at myself, because I of course, I chose the most difficult, intense yoga, the Bikram yoga in the
of
hot
course.
studio with, yeah. So I still have that. My personality hasn't changed. I'm still there, and I'm still trying to push myself to, evolve and keep performing better and better.
Hmm.
But I have a lot more compassion for myself now than I used to. So some days, if I'm in the yoga studio and I fall over and I don't get the pose right, I used to beat myself up about that. But now my mental place is a lot more, well, maybe it's not my day and tomorrow will be different.
Yeah.
So that the mental side looks different, but the physical, I still kind of push myself quite a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I also practice yoga, and I heard a lot of people saying, already, like, I don't do yoga because I cannot do the postures. But the whole point of the thing is that you don't have to be able to do everything, and that you're
Yes.
learning and improving every day. And I think
Yes.
it's the yoga is I think yoga, mindfulness, there are practices that help that. Do you have other practices in your daily routine that also you see that are also very helpful for you?
Yes, I have a few. I journal every day. First thing in the morning as part of my routine, I journal. So I just write a A4 page with my pen and my paper, and I just release myself of any emotions and things that are going to get in the way of my thinking. And that helps to clear the path for my writing. It just releases. So I read about practices like expressive writing to release strong emotions. So I've embedded that. And then I have a weekly gratitude practice. So from what I learned in my research on positive psychology, a weekly practice is probably the most beneficial for our happiness, so that it doesn't become a chore and a burden.
Yeah.
I pick 5 things that I'm grateful for in the week before. And then, of course, meditation. So I try to meditate as often as I can. I'm probably at the moment, I'm at about 5 days a week. And it's not for long. I just try to make it 10 minutes or 15 minutes so that it's manageable. And I do, the days that I meditate go better. They're smoother, I'm more calm, and I can manage better. But there are days I feel that I just have too much to achieve and I can't squeeze it in. And that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. What would you just say to pre-burnout overdoer Kathy if you could meet her? And how do you think she would react to what you would say?
That's a great question. I think I would tell her that you're headed for a really serious illness that you'll carry for the rest of your life. And I don't think she would believe it. I know that I wouldn't have listened to that kind of advice. I really did need my whole health and my whole life to collapse
Yeah.
for a change to happen. But it's my hope that my target audience is not quite as stubborn as I am, that they can maybe learn from. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
That's all I would say, but she wouldn't really change much, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Um, do you think that it's possible to fully recover from burnout?
Yes, I do think it's possible. I feel that I'm completely on the other side of it now, and my life, my energy levels are much higher than even pre-burnout stage. I feel energized and happy and excited, enthusiastic about life. But I must say, that being said, I do think that it changes you. I'm not the same person because of what I've lived through. So I have recovered, but I'm different. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We haven't talked a lot about because your experience with burnout resulted in also you having a stress related autoimmune disease.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how it manifested and what it is.
Yes. Okay. So I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So that means my immune system, instead of protecting me from viruses and bacteria, it is attacking my thyroid tissue. And what happens when that starts happening, your DNA changes, and it's very, very difficult to reverse. So it's pretty much a lifelong illness. And what happened originally was in the beginning when I got diagnosed, I had some really terrible symptoms. I had a lot of hair loss, and I had tremors. I started shaking. My hands were shaking all the time. I got heart palpitations, so I had to go on beta blocker, the heart medication to slow down the heartbeat. And then I had a lot of things like sweating and overheating, sleep disturbance. I couldn't sleep even though I was so exhausted. And then a lot of the psychological side of things, the irritability and depression and things that came with it. I had trouble concentrating. And decision making was quite difficult. I felt quite anxious when I had to make a decision because my brain was really struggling with that.
Yeah.
But there were a lot and metabolism slows down with the thyroid. So all of those things all happened at the time when I was diagnosed. And then over time, I was able to then draw my thyroid back to functioning normally. So I'm at a point now with no medication that it's actually working okay. But I'm obviously at very high risk of becoming hypothyroid in future, which would mean taking medication and having a slow metabolism and gaining weight and things like that.
Yeah.
So
And
manage that risk now. Yeah.
Yeah. And how are you taking care of that now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So managing stress is quite important for me. So that's why I put in the practices of meditation and things, and yoga and that, and gentle exercise. And I also obviously do the kind of work that energizes me, and I enjoy it. I think sleep also has quite a big impact, and I think many people in our society anyway are not getting enough sleep. Yeah. So I really fight for my sleep. My husband's quite a night owl, and he wants to stay up later. So I bought myself earplugs and an eye mask, and when I go to bed, I go to bed. There's no negotiating or no chit chat. He starts to tell me stories. I shut it off. Sleep is vital. So I actually kind of have to fight for it, and that's one of the ways that I try to manage so that my body can feel in a good way. And then the other thing, I had to change my diet quite a lot, and so I start every day with a green smoothie, a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables, and I had to remove gluten from my diet. So those are the sort of lifestyle changes that I maintain now to be as healthy as I can be.
Yeah, a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Do you have any final piece of advice or a message to people who are listening or watching us now?
Yeah, I think, lifestyle change is very difficult. So a lot of people resist that when they say, oh, I don't want to give up gluten, or I don't want to change. I don't want to give up coffee. I love that morning coffee. And lifestyle change is very hard, but it's well worth it. Really, it's worth investing in yourself and maintaining your health so that you can avoid, a stress-induced illness. We can't avoid stress because it's pervasive, it's part of everyday life, but we can avoid burnout. We can care for ourselves and prioritize ourselves enough if we care enough about it. So even though that lifestyle change is hard, it's well worth that investment to live a life of joy and health. That would be the thing I'd like to communicate to people. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yes. Before we finish, I want to acknowledge you.
Thank you.
For your bravery in your journey and for not only learning the lessons that life put for you, but also sharing them with the world and being so kind with it, and for being an advocate of self-preservation, which is something so important, and seeking your passion, which is also something you care a lot about, and it's also super, super important, and for working towards healing burnout from yourself and helping others on the way. And thank you for your work. It's super important, and it helps people like myself and like other people who really need that.
Yes, thank you so much. It's hard sometimes, and it is always wonderful to connect with people who are aligned and who understand the importance of these things. So thank you so much for what you're doing and for your work, and I wish you so much success in the journey that you're traveling.
Thank you. So that was the interview with Kathy Mann. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find more about her work and become a beta reader of her new book on kathymann.co.za from South Africa, or on her Facebook page, facebook.com/KMannWriter, K-A-Man with double N, writer. I will leave the URLs in the show notes in case you find it easier to read them. So thank you for listening. If this episode resonated in you in any way, and I really hope it did, please share it with your network. You can find more about this project at thebetterachiever.com, on Facebook or Instagram at thebetterachiever. The theme song is played by Josh Woodward from freemusicarchive.org. You're more than welcome to leave comments or questions in our online channels, or you can email me at carol@thebetterachiever.com. I am Carol Mittersteiner, signing off the Better Achiever session for today. Very happy and very thankful. Thank you again, and enjoy your day.